Morning, everybody. Trust that you are well.
Morning, sir.
It's a nice, crisp and clear connection. Thank you, Andrishka. That was that sounded very. If you're sitting in the same room as me, which is always good because previous session I had students scattered all over from Centurion campus to somewhere on our campus, to students in class, and yeah, unfortunately the internet connection was not always as stable everywhere. And yes, as of last night, unfortunately not today, but I always keep my plan B and C in place when you deal with customers like Eskom. I'm pretty sure that last night was just a tester for us to say, don't forget about us. We are still here and we are still going to cut your power at some point. I'm just bracing myself and preparing myself for some interruptions, load shedding interruptions, or rescheduling over the next number of weeks. I'm almost one. When there's this little smoke last night, there's definitely a fire somewhere. So again, as I said to the students in the previous class, absolutely nothing we can do about it. Nothing we can do about this. And fortunately, it's not as limiting and doesn't have as much impact on your online quizzes that you write for tests and exams, because after our first attempt last year, when we went into hard lockdown, we made the whole entire 24-hour day on which the exam was conducted available to students to do it. And then we restricted them to certain hours, 8 to maybe 11 in the morning, or there were 2 o'clock, 1 o'clock sessions in the afternoon. And if you then have load shedding, then you're in trouble. So I think it's very sensible to have a flexible option available to do your online test, which in your case would be next Monday, the whole of Monday for that matter. So if you, after today's session, and it's an open invitation to everybody as you join, thank you very much. It's an open invitation. Although you write your test coming Monday on the 19th, people, you do not have to do the test before, because it's not like it was in the past where during a test week there's no contact sessions, no classes, online or on campus. We continue with classes. I'm not going to, let me just get Jessica on board. I'm not going to start any new work on Monday, but I will be available via this Teams link for the third period session. If there are any last minute questions, if you want to just provide yourself with some reassurance, I won't be addressing the exam because some of you might have even written the exam by that time or have done the exam by that time. So don't ask me questions about that, because others can then benefit from the answers I give you. So I'm not going to fall into that trap, but I am available for the students because it's a 2-hour paper. It's more than enough time. There are 2 questions in the paper and it's 50 marks. That's your test for next Monday. That's the logistics out the way. It's done in a similar format that you are used to thus far with your first self-assessment class test that you did, and the other class test that will be available from tomorrow for you to do. Similar scenario, similar format, no surprises, more than enough time for you to complete it. I think Mr. Kirsten set a nice paper for you. Nobody's trying to catch nobody out here. I've had a look at the paper itself. It's straightforward. You just need to add your own little personal twist to it, and that's the nice thing, and that's where we are when we are third years. I want your contribution, not just a generic contribution. But what I've done for today's session is that I've taken all 60 chapters that you have to prepare for the test on Monday, and I've taken the most important aspects, the core components of each chapter. I've taken it out and I've done it in a separate slideshow, which I haven't uploaded to Canvas yet, but which I will do this afternoon. I want to discuss it first, and maybe we want to add 1 or 2 things during our discussion today. Then we can do that. So that's the purpose of today's session, to help you to prepare, for you to maybe later on, obviously, because you have a recording to look at it again. When you prepare for your test on Monday, do not just use this slideshow of 40 pages. It's a summary of a summary. Remember, the slides are summaries of each chapter. Now I've made a summary of the summary. You are cutting it very thin if you only focus on the slides in this particular presentation today. Right, but let's go chapter by chapter. Chapter 1 was sort of an introduction as to what is services marketing about, and I think predominantly in chapter 1 it was how are services different from products, or are they different? And I think we've identified that, and in greater detail, obviously, in chapter 1, you'll find each of those characteristics explained to you at the hand of examples and some images sometimes too. But the 5 characteristics that distinguish between a product and a service is the intangibility. In other words, you will be able to, in the case of a product, to use all your senses: the touch, the feel, the smell, the taste, the hearing, which is not the case with a service. The inseparability, in other words, the production and the consumption happens at the same time. Again, you can only be examined by a doctor, and they can only get your tooth filled or pulled by a dentist if you're actually sitting in their room. Can't be done in another way. Heterogeneity refers to the fact that you know what, one day is not going to be as good as the other. So there are definitely differences in quality in the service delivery from day 1 to day 2. Sometimes, especially if I've used the example before of a waitress at a restaurant, you can't expect to have the same waitress at the restaurant, and you may go back to a restaurant because you received fantastic service from this waiter or waitress the previous time you were there, and therefore you go back, and now you're disappointed because that same waiter and waitress is not there. It's because they work different shifts, for that matter. But the quality of the service, even if it was the same waiter and waitress, might not be the same. You might go a different time of the day. It was busier. It was maybe more relaxed the previous time you were there, and she or he had more time to attend to you. Now it's maybe very busy and rushed, and therefore they can't pay all attention to you. So the service delivery is not exactly the same. It's because of the human involvement. Perishability refers specifically to the fact that the products cannot be stored. You cannot now buy a ticket to Johannesburg, and that is for coming Friday, returning on Sunday evening, and then not use it and expect to use it next Friday when it's long weekend. They're just going to laugh at you. There is an expiry date, in other words, on your service, as there is with products. But products you can actually store for a while. I mean, if you bought a product, you don't have to use it today. If you bought the product on Friday, you don't have to use it, unless obviously it's fresh produce like fruits and veggies and milk and yogurts and bread. Then if you store it for more than a week, you're probably going to have problems getting quality from that product. Now, you can't store a service. You have to use the service at the scheduled time. You can change it, like for instance, if it's possible to change flights, to change your hair appointment, to change your doctor's appointment. But once the service have started, it has to be completed. You cannot continue it later on. Okay. It's like writing your test online. Once the time clock starts for 2 hours, you can do whatever you want within those 2 hours. But once the 2 hours are gone, the exam opportunity is finished. You cannot put it on hold and then go for a run or go to the gym or go to the mall and then come back later and finish the test, for instance. It's in a similar manner to what is usually the case with most services. And then there's no ownership. You can't take ownership of a service. That's your doctor, but it's also somebody else's doctor. The doctor doesn't belong to you. You just use the service and pay for the services for the time that doctor or dentist attends to you. Okay. Let's go to the next one. Also in chapter 1, we'll see that individually I have given you a sort of a summary of what each of those mean. I've just gone through that for you. Inseparability, heterogeneity, and finally perishability. Now also from chapter 1 is that services can be classified as either equipment-based services or people-based services. Equipment-based services refer to, for instance, the service that some garages offer you that's automated. The service is there, but there's nobody helping you. The car wash, the machine does it itself. The ATM at the bank, it's there for you to use. The vending machine, you put your money in, you get the product that you want, hopefully. Unskilled operators, for instance, not necessarily at any previous qualification, but at least you hope that they have a driver's license. Similarly with going to the movies, you don't need a qualification to operate that, but you need some training. So you're unskilled. You probably have a minimum like a grade 12, for instance, or whatever, and some in-house training, but no official formal qualifications. And then you've got your skilled operators. You cannot operate on somebody if you have not passed your 7-year medical, obtained your medical degree and specialized in surgery. You cannot fly a plane if you haven't been trained and qualified and passed the test and did your thousands of flying hours. Some people are obviously expected to be highly skilled for them to perform their particular service. The people-based services also can be unskilled labor. You don't need a qualification to be a security guard, but there are some basics that you need to have, basic skills that you need to have, but you are predominantly categorized as unskilled labor. Skilled labor, electricians, plumbers, you name it, those are all skilled laborers. And then you've got your professionals, engineers, architects, doctors, dentists, those type of individuals. Right. Let's progress to the marketing mix of services and products. We know that the marketing mix from marketing that you did in your first year for any product is referred to as the 4 Ps. It refers to the product that you're selling, the place where you can get it and where it's available, the price at which it sells, and whatever form of promotion you've used, advertising, personal selling, catalogs, whatever, to communicate with the customer that the product is available. If you are marketing services, because of their intangible nature, it sometimes, or not sometimes, it always requires for us to add an additional 3 Ps to the marketing mix. And that would be the people involved, because it's services, remember, dentist, hairdresser, all those people, skilled professionals or even sometimes unskilled professionals. The physical evidence, that's the building itself, the bricks and mortar, where the front office workers who are supporting services to your core business find themselves, and then the process processes involved. You have to make a you have to pick up the phone and phone the doctor's rooms, speak to the receptionist or the admin person there, make an appointment. You can't just rock up and go there and expect to be treated. They are going to help you, but it's not going to be when you want it, unless it's an emergency and you, yeah, well, let's not go into any graphics. What happens in Chapter 2? Chapter 2 referred to the perceptions and expectations of customers. We have to make sure that we understand that most people's perceptions is based on past experiences and very often word of mouth, aided by obviously good advertising. But what people expect are what they believe the levels of service that will be delivered is going to be. So that's their standard of reference. What you expect it to be, what you're usually based on, as I said, the perception linked to your past experiences, own past experiences, other people informing you that that was a good service or that's a company that you can support, they had a good experience there. Compared to what your actual experience then is where the biggest challenge lies, because that's where the gap opens between actual experience and expected experience, because that is how we measure service quality. Perceptions, on the other hand, are the processes by which individuals select and organize and interpret the information that they are bombarded with on a daily basis through all different platforms. And they sort of change over time, maybe because you get more information on a particular product or service, maybe because you've experienced the service yourself, so it's not just now based on what other people have shared with you. You have now personally experienced it yourself, and then that expectation later becomes a perception. Perception becomes an expectation. How do we measure our service quality? We use the SERVQUAL method, and that is to say SERV is service, and then we dropped a few letters, and then quality, SERVQUAL. The SERVQUAL method, multidimensional, and basically what it is that your expectations, E, and the actual performance by the service provider, the P, the difference between those two, as I have just said, would indicate if your service has been fantastic or not, and that indicates what level your service quality is on. In other words, SERVQUAL, SQ, is our expectations minus what we actually experience in the form of the performance by the service provider. Right. There's also another way to determine the service quality, or to measure the service quality. The GAPS model, as it's referred to, serves as a point of reference to organizations to help them identify all the aspects of service delivery. There's, I think, 22 of them that they've identified. We're not going to go into great detail on them specifically, but we do know that there are 5 different gaps: the knowledge, the standards, delivery, communication, and service gap that customers can experience. Where the knowledge gap is the difference between the customer's expectations and the organization's perception on how the customers what the customer's expectations are. What you know, as they say, will set you free. The more you know, the better. In this case, there's a knowledge gap because what you know, what you expect, and what the organization perceives that you know is different. There might also be a standards gap. That's the difference between the organization's knowledge of the customer's perception and expectations and the service standards that they've set. They know what the customer's perceptions and expectations are, but the service standards that they've set for themselves are different. That's why we have a gap there. Then there's also the delivery gap. That's the difference between organizations' service standards that they have set and the actual service that they are now promoting and providing to the customer. Communications gap is the gap between the actual service that they have provided and the service that the organization's promotion campaign have promised you. And then you have a service gap, the difference between the expectations of a customer and the perceived service delivery of the organization. People, I'm not going to ask you, and if you think one of the questions that you'll find in your paper is going to be something like this, where I give you or expect you to name the difference, explain to me what the gap model is about, show me what the 5 different gaps are, explain to me what the 5 different gaps are, and then give me an example of each. That's not going to happen. That's first year and second year way of asking things. If this appears in a paper, it would be in the form of a case study where you are expected to apply it, nothing else. Okay, but again, refer back to the format in which your class test that you have done and the other one that you will still be able to do this week will have been constructed. In chapter 3, we did with the purchase process of services. There are different types of purchase decisions or buying decisions that can be identified. And it's based on the degree of the buyer involvement and the degree of the differences among the services. The more complex the service is, the more time the consumer takes, the longer the service delivery process would be, and it requires a higher involvement from the consumer before making a decision. That when you're making an investment to put 500,000 Rand away, or booking a family holiday to Disneyland, it's going to cost you more than 100,000 Rand if you're a family of 4. That's a complex decision. The degree of buyer involvement there is very much. You're going to do a lot of research. You're not just going to get the first option or take the first option that's available. Oh, that sounds nice, but you are going to search and search and search and compare before you make your decision. Then there's also a distance reducing behavior. That is where there's a high involvement by the buyer, because there are slight differences in the brand, in the services that they offer. For instance, short-term insurances, the products are very much the same. There's very, very little difference between the products. Habitual means, you know what, you're almost in the habit of making such decisions. Not a lot of involvement from the buyer, in a sense where they spend time on making the decision or reaching a final decision. You know, you've used plumbers before, you've had your hair done before, you've been to a doctor before. If you were happy or at least satisfied or not dissatisfied with any of the services, you'll more than likely go back to them. It's almost too much trouble to find a new one, so it becomes an habitual buying. Then you have a variety seeking where there's low involvement. There's significant differences between the different service providers, and you just like variety. You don't want to stick to the one. You want to go with the one that offers you the best package. So there's no real involvement in taking time and effort and putting a lot of effort. You just compare the two and say, oh, that's a cheaper option. And the products itself are pretty much the same. I'm going to go for the cheaper option. That's as simple as that. There are further two types of decision making that we can identify, and that's the routine decision making, which basically is when you are in the habit of buying things a certain time during the day from a certain preferred supplier because it's maybe the most convenient supermarket closer to you, or the closest hairdresser to you, or the closest doctor to you, then your decision making becomes very routinized. But it can also sometimes be that you are very impulsive. And some people are slightly more impulsive than others, but sometimes you are forced by the circumstances to be impulsive. Maybe something happens, like for instance, you discover there's a snake in your backyard. That's never happened before. Now all of a sudden you have to make an impulsive decision and frantically phone around or Google snake handlers or in the area, whatever. So again, sometimes the situation forces you to make an impulsive decision. Impulsive decision is not, should I buy this dress or not? Should I buy these pair of jeans or not? Should I buy this top or not? That's not impulsive. That's just who we are. Right. The phases in the buying process would be that we have, sorry, going to that. Oops, that was, whew, how did I slip on that one? Anyway. You will have a pre-purchase stage, you will have a stage during which the service is being received, and you will have a phase that kicks in after the service have been delivered, and you now evaluating how the service have happened and performed, and if it was actually okay or not. We've gone into greater detail in the rest of chapter 3 on this process. For me, it's important that you just understand the different process that starts with the awareness of the need, searching for information, evaluating all your different options, all as part of your pre-service stage. The fact that in your service encountering stage, you have a repeat service, or you've requested a service from the person or the service provider that you've chosen in your pre-purchase stage. This is the service actually now happens, and then in your final stage, you are now evaluating the performance of the service provider that you've chosen in stage number 2. During stage 3, you evaluate their performance, you decide if you're going to stay with them or not, or if you're going to, in future, maybe find another service provider, rather because you were not happy with this particular exercise. Those are the stages, those are the sub steps within a stage. It's always good to know the steps in the purchase process. In chapter 4, we dealt with the marketing research that and why it's important for us to do it. We started off by saying, what is market research? We concluded that it's the process of designing, collecting, analyzing, and reporting information that is we use for a marketing problem. It is for services very important to collect the information about what your customers require. Why do you actually draft that survey? Why are you conducting that survey? Why do you want them to answer those 3-4 questions? Why do you want them to rate their service? Yesterday I was at the supermarket. I'm not going to mention the name. I was at the till and I was busy paying for my goods, and there was a little piece of paper that says rate my service, and it was like those 3 smiley faces, or the red, yellow and green faces. And I said to the lady, do you have a pen on you that I can use, because this is a manual quick 3 ticks that I have to make, but I don't have a pen with me, and she didn't have a pen with me. Well, those kind of things, you know what? If you really, if you're offering that opportunity for the customer to rate your service, you shouldn't be rushing up and down trying to find a pen for that person to do it, because again, by the time I found a pen, I didn't complete that that rating because I wasn't going to wait for a pen. Okay, so the service was obviously good, but not as great that I was actually going to wait to take the effort and time to tell them that the service are good or bad. Very often customers just go from a situation like that if they're really serious and if it wasn't an amazing experience, or if it was a serious issue that they would like to bring it to the attention of management, instead of filling in those or that form, they would actually just walk to the manager's office and see if that person is available or not, and then share their concern with such a person. When we're doing marketing research, we can do qualitative or quantitative research, where your quantitative research refers to the quantity, the numerical collection of numerical data to make decisions. This is usually where you're trying to find out how many, for instance, active users there are in a particular month on your app, for instance, where qualitative research refers more to trying to find out what people say and think about your specific service. Not how many people are using it, you want to know more. Okay, right, we know that 5,000 people actually use our service and they actually visit our app. That's fantastic, that's great. But how many of those are satisfied? How many of those are satisfied? What are those who say they are satisfied? What are they satisfied about? What makes them happy? Those who are not happy, what are they unhappy about? Okay, so you want more information. You focus more on the quality of the feedback and not the quantity of the feedback. The research process, again, we've got 5 stages. You are advised just to know those. Again, if something like this appears in an assignment, it would be to apply these steps to a particular case study. Okay. Just to summarize the different steps in the research process, you will define a problem, then you are going to develop a research plan, you can collect data, then you're going to analyze the data, and then based on your recommendations that you'll, or based on your results, you will make recommendations in your research report. Chapter 5. At any point, anybody can stop me and say, whoa, hang on, sir. Phew, that's gone right over my head. I'm not sure about that. Again, at the start of chapter 5, I reiterate, do not just study the 40 pages of this slide. It's a summary of a summary. If you want to give yourself the best chance to do well in your test and future exam, rather go through the original slides. It'll take longer, but you are definitely going to be better off. And these were also, again, as I said, summaries of summaries and just taken from the other slides. Right. Designing, service design. How and what service design demands that you must be extremely creative, and that you have to repeatedly test new concepts, new products, new services, new strategies. There are 2 stages. You've got your planning stage and your implementation stage. The most frequently used tools for planning is to conceptualize a new service, and that is to have a service blueprint and to also have a quality function deployment. We are going to be looking at each of these just now. To be honest with you, this is not the only thing on this particular slide, and the reason why I've included this is right at the top. When you are designing a new service, the first question ought to be, what is the purpose? Why are we doing this? like yesterday, I think it was yesterday, that on the way into work, it was on the KFM breakfast show, Elon Musk has now taught a monkey to play video games, and the monkey is then rewarded if he reaches a certain level, or when he reaches certain levels, with a banana smoothie. And everybody says, what the, and what next, and why? You know what? In the case of research, in case of people who do have too much time and too much money, these things happen. However, these things never happen just because. The reason for them conducting, or for Elon Musk conducting an exercise like that, was to test certain technology that they want to apply in future with people who have lost limbs in accidents, are getting prosthetics, where those prosthetics can be operated through the use of this technology, for instance, to make it more efficient and more real. And at the moment, I think it's rather advanced. Probably in 10 years' time, we'll think, okay, that wasn't such a bad exercise at all. The fact is, we need people to try these things and to do the research, to experiment. And unfortunately, it's usually people with lots of money and lots of time. However, always ask yourself a question: why are we doing this? What's the purpose? If you can't really clearly answer that, then you probably shouldn't do it. Next slide. We have addressed the importance of the front and the back office activities. Front office activities, people who are in direct contact with the customers. People in the back office or involved in back office activities, very often people who deal with customer complaints, doing the admin, all essential components of your business, and to ensure that the business runs smoothly and offer top quality service. The important thing, and the reason why I've included this, is that organizing, coordinating and integrating your front and your back office activities is what makes the business offer optimal high quality service. If the one's doing it in the same manner and they're not as committed because they are stuck in a back room and never see customers, they just hear customers complain over the phone the whole time, you know what? They might not be as committed and loyal to your company's vision as people working in the front office or involved in the front office activities. Just again, take note of the fact that both front and back office activities and people involved in those activities play an equally important role in the success of your service delivery. There will always come a time that you have to develop new services. I think when times are tough, when it's recessions, when we have pandemics, when we're in lockdown, we have to change things, how we do and how we have done it. And very often, this results in developing of new services. Now, the types of new services that can be could be as a result of new innovations, something that has never been done before. And like, for instance, now the example I've used with Elon Musk, nobody's done it. So that's why he did it. It might result in something very, very innovative and very important in future, but you only know that once you've tried it. There might be startup businesses for new services in an existing industry. In other words, there's a new business that's offering the same services, but it's just not maybe offered in a particular area, and they've saw the opportunity and say, listen, I know that there's an existing market here, but there's no service offering it. We will be offering that, and they open a new startup. Then there's also new services for existing markets, for instance. It's just add-ons as technology progresses and requires us to remain creative and not stagnate in our business. We sometimes just tweak it and add a little extra to the service that we already offer. The captive audience, the existing market is there already, the service exists already, and you're just adding an extra service to what you're offering already. A new market can also be the case. It can result in, all of a sudden, there's a new market opens, often linked to innovations. New innovations might end up creating a market for a new service which didn't exist until the innovation or the idea was created. There could be line extensions. We know that businesses add new products in their product lines. Similarly with services, they add extra services. Maybe initially you were just doing technical work on specific brand computers, and you've extended that service to include other brands and other makes now as well. So extending it, and maybe you're not just focusing now on hardware, but you're also including software. So you're extending your service line. There could be improvements of existing services. The example that we use there are longer business hours. So the service is still there. The business now decides we're just going to be open for a bit longer. I think the banking services did that initially. It was just open Monday to Friday, and then maybe till 11 o'clock on a Saturday. And then over the last number of years, the last 10, 15 years, it's also available. At some points, not all the banks are open, but some locations, it's open on Sundays as well for the convenience of the customer. Styles change, yes. Sometimes businesses align strategically. Sometimes businesses are bought out by other businesses. Sometimes brands combine, and this could also result in a new service that is now collectively offered, and they're combining the best, let's say for instance Checkers and ShopRite, to offer a new improved service. When we develop new services, we go through different phases. The two phases that is most important is the generation of new ideas. We have to go through that, because that is where we define what the objectives and the strategies is or would be for the new service. That is very closely linked to what the organization strategy is. Are we looking for a new service to add or to develop because we want to penetrate a specific market, or we want to diversify ourselves in a particular market, or we want to differentiate ourselves from our competitors in a particular market or industry? The second phase, obviously, the idea evaluation, and that almost happens on a continuous basis, and that is necessary for you to see if you are on the right track or not. Is there really a benefit in this new service? In other words, when it comes to the bottom line, are you getting more clients as a result? Has your turnover increased? Depending on what your objective was and what time frame your objective was set for, it could prove to be either successful or not, but linked directly to the objectives and goals that you have set for yourself or for that particular service. It starts with the services blueprint, which is basically just a picture map or visual display of the service. The example that we have in our textbooks that I've in a different format just included on the screen and in your slides is that the components of time, evidence, customer journey, the front stage or the front office activities, the backstage or back office activities, and the support processes must always be present in any services blueprint. Am I going to ask you to develop a services blueprint for me in the exam? or the test? Probably not. Who knows? But I think at the end of the day, it's for me more important that you understand the components that form the services blueprint. And then obviously, we also have to go through 5 different steps. Just again, know the fact that there are 6 steps that you have to go through, and know them only to apply them and not to necessarily explain them to me. You'll be identifying a process that should be in the blueprint, identify the customers of market segment that is going to most likely use your service. Then you're going to map the service process from the customer to that point, map the front office and the back office employees' actions, link the contact activities that you need that will support your service, and finally add the evidence that oops, I did, sorry. I just want to get that. My mouse is now frozen. Right. The service quality matrix. Service quality matrix, again, know that how the service quality matrix work, where basically you list, or on a matrix, a service quality matrix, you should list what the customer's criteria would be to rate their service, and those at the top: friendliness, improved communication, change corporate culture, reorganization, and training. That those are the elements for the business that they can control. They see what the criteria is that the customer would prefer and see as critical, but which are the ones that you can focus on and improve. Okay. Again, just read through the example in your textbook, just to understand how the process works. This is not the type of question, neither with a blueprint, neither with the quality matrix, that we are going to expect you to. I think maybe if it was a written exam and if it was a 3-hour paper and you could do illustrations and stuff like that, it would probably be. But also in the context of the module itself, to me, the understanding of how it works is sufficient. You're probably not going to apply it immediately in any way in the industry. Obviously, also because there's a lot of technology available nowadays, and these templates exist already. You don't have to design templates for a blueprint and for a service quality matrix. It's there. You just populate it with the information that you obviously collect. The final chapter for you to prepare for the test is chapter 6, where we dealt with the pricing of services, and we realized that it is very difficult because it's easy if you produce something and you know that you use this and that and this plastic and that particular material and this coloring and that, and there's a price for each of those items to determine what the cost price or the manufacturing cost was. Excuse me, and then obviously you know what your markup would be, so you can actually easily determine the selling price. It's a bit more difficult with services because there's so many inputs and outputs variables that we have to include. There are also obviously still certain fixed costs and certain variable costs. I mean, even if you're providing a service as a doctor, you still have to pay the rent for the building that you're operating from. and the equipment that you use for that matter. So, and you pay your salaries for your supporting staff, like your receptionists and the admin people. That doesn't disappear. That is regardless if you're offering a service or a service or selling a product. Those things are all evident in both cases, physical product or service, regardless. One of the reasons why it's difficult to determine a price for a service is that it's difficult for us to determine the perceived customer value. We know that there's certain costs involved for the customer, but we also know that there's some benefits for the customer. The difference obviously will result in how the customer perceived the whole experience to have been, if it was valuable or not. And if it has added value to the customer, if they see it as value for money, obviously they will rate it as a good service, and they will continue to use that service. A customer's value could either be the value in the product itself. For instance, the flight that you're getting from Cape Town to Durban, or from Cape Town to Joey's, that's the actual service, the product itself. That is where you get the product value from. The service value refers to the worth of the utility value of the service as assigned by the customer, where personal value refers to the value assigned to the personnel, the people performing the service. How much was the actual service? How much value can you put on the actual service? Or is the personal value more important? Would you go back and use that same service provider because of the people involved, or because of the service that they offer, the specific service? Or can you go to another service provider because they might offer it in a better manner? And then sometimes people tend to use a particular service provider because of the image that they perceive, or the image that has been established of that particular service provider. Everybody says that's the person that you need to go to. This is the best guy to do this. And then people start believing it once they have tried the service themselves, or they have the opposite experience and say, no, it wasn't that great. I don't know where people rate this. I had the fortune of attending a workshop many years ago, where the person that was the keynote speaker was the best salesperson. He was obviously rated as the best salesperson in Canada, and well, that's quite a claim. That's quite a title to carry. And he started off, and obviously everybody says, well, I think he could read our minds. He said, what makes this person the best salesperson in Canada? How did I become the best salesperson in Canada? He says, you know what? I told them I'm the best salesperson in Canada. And then basically, once I have told people, you know what, I'm the best salesperson in Canada, that's how he introduced himself. Nobody has actually even rated him up to that point. He was just, that was his entrance line. My name is so-and-so, I'm the best salesperson in Canada. And by repeating that a number of times, people started believing it, and people started telling him, if you back it, however, with being the best then, and delivering what you actually said that you are capable of doing, then people start believing that you are, even if you have not gone through any formal competition to determine who the best person is. It was just a different approach, and I was quite blown at the stage. But again, yes, that sometimes is what you have to do. There's customer costs. We've got monetary cost and non-monetary cost. So monetary cost is actually what you've got to pay to. What's a normal GP visit cost you? 200, 300 bucks. What does a normal haircut cost you? A visit to the hair salon cost you? 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 800, 900 bucks. That's the monetary cost. Then you have a non-monetary cost, which is time, physical, psychological, and sensory cost. I think on the next slide, we look at each of these individually. What's our time cost? The time that we actually have spent, for instance, waiting in the queue and could have done something else. The time it takes for the service to be performed sometimes can be seen as wasted because we want instant gratification, and it's because of the intangible nature of services that doesn't really happen. It will take time. It takes time to cut your hair. It's not going to be done in 10 seconds. It's not going to the shop, giving them $10, getting a cool drink, and then leaving. It takes a bit of time to deliver that service. Your physical cost could be the fact that how on that particular day that service was performed, you actually experience it. Because of the waiting and the queuing, the environment in which it happened added to your discomfort maybe, or you became very fatigued because you were standing in a queue for a long time to be serviced. These are all things that add up to your physical experience and the physical cost, or is seen as a physical cost. The psychological cost include the perceived risk of and the fear in many cases for what the service is going to be like or can be like. The example we use is the fear for flying. And then you've got your sensory cost that refer to your specific senses, how the senses have experienced the whole service delivery process, and that would be certain smells of good smells, bad smells, definitely add, or how your senses react to a particular how your senses react to smells and to certain smells and symbols and sights and sounds definitely add to your experience, and therefore the sensory cost is included in the total cost for a customer too. Right, we're almost done. One thing that I want you to remind of again is the price and demand. We know that if our demand usually goes down, or the demand usually goes down when your prices increase. Price elasticity, and there is a illustration in your textbooks and in the slides. If a price is seen as very elastic, or the demand is seen as very elastic to any changes in price, if there is a huge difference between if there's an increase, for instance, in the demand for your product, if there's a significant increase in the demand, if there's been a slight change in price, if there's a change in price but it doesn't significantly lead to a greater demand, then there is an inelasticity. I've used the example in class of the elastic band compared to a rope. The rope has a beginning and an end. If you've cut it into a 1 meter long rope, you take one in your left hand and one in your right hand, you cannot extend that rope. You can actually bring it closer to each other, but when you extend that rope, it only goes to that particular point where that the length allows it to go, because it is a certain length. Elastic band, however, you can also, if you stretch it out, it can go beyond the point of the rope, because it's elastic. And obviously, similarly with your elasticity of demand, if there's a change in price, the demand is seen as elastic if it actually impacts on it a great deal. If it doesn't really impact that much on the increase in your demand, it means that it's inelastic. Right. What affects the demand? The availability of substitutes. Are there alternatives? Can I go to somewhere else? Oh, geez, I have to stay with these guys because there's nobody else can perform the service in my town. The demand is inclined to be inelastic for complementary services, extra services that's added by the service provider or offered by the service provider. That sometimes can also impact on the service. So does the relationship with your competitors' prices. How does your prices compare to those of your competitors? Also, if it's a necessity to get the service that you want, or is it just a luxury service? Do you really need to go to the spa to get your treatments because you have a skin condition and that's part of your recommended prescription by your dermatologist? Or is it a luxury treat for yourself to go there once in a couple of months just to revise yourself or revive yourself? The time you have available is also very important. If you do not have the time to or the time that is often that the service provider saves you from doing it yourself, like a garden services, for instance, you'll rather pay them the X amount per session that they visit and mow your lawn and attend to your garden, because you don't have the time to do that yourself. Okay, so the time factor is also an important component. And then finally, we have different approaches to price servicing, which is a cost-based, competition-based, and value-based. Just know the difference between the two. Remember, the cost-based is the one where you basically determine what the cost would be to manufacture, to produce that service, to offer that service to your customers. You add your profit to that, and then obviously the price that you'll charge for your service is the result of that particular exercise. The competitor-based one, you look at what your competitors offer, and then you decide if it's going to be wise to rather stay exactly the same as them and maybe offer something more, or maybe make it a bit more expensive and offer more, or maybe offer it a bit cheaper but offer exactly the same. Those are all competition-based pricing. And value-based pricing is where you add that extra value that makes the customer that's essential to the customer, and in not just it's not just the price, it's not just the actual service itself, and if the price is seen as value for money, but it's become such a valuable service. I would rate my accountant's service to me on an annual basis based on when she does my annual taxes for me, for instance. I would rate that as an invaluable service. I can't do without that. That person knows my financial in and outs and has done for more than 10, 15 years. And as a result of that, knows exactly what business I'm in, and therefore knows exactly what my deductions could be. So there's an understanding. I can probably go to another accountant that can do the same. But the fact is, because I've been doing it, and this person has been doing it for me for so many years, and really have gone above and beyond. And in some cases, I thought, oh my goodness, this is a tough year. I'm definitely going to have to pay SARS, pay into SARS. She turns it around, and legitimately, there's nothing, but just because she knows my business, she knows where I can actually qualify for certain deductions, and she makes those recommendations. But she can also just pick up the phone and chat to me like a friend, and not keep the clock running the whole time and then send me a bill for it. So very often that value cannot be quantified, but it is very often an important consideration for customers. I think we've reached the end of our session. I want to wish you good luck with the test on Monday. As I said, send me emails if there's any questions that you might have. I'm going to upload this as a PDF to your weekly resources. If you look at your timetable, people, we are in week 8, and your test is next week. I'm going to load it in week 8. I'm not going to load it because week 8 was when you were initially going to write your exam and do revision. So all the other chapters, the 6 chapters, that the original slides is also in there. So I'm going to put it under your resources, not additional resources. I'm going to put it under your weekly resources for week 8 with all the other slides of chapters 1 to 6. This will just be marked as an additional one, which would refer to it as revision chapters 1 to 6. Okay, any questions from anybody at this point?
No, sir, thank you.
You're all good. It's almost lunchtime again, so yeah, go and enjoy.
Thank you, sir. You too.
Keep well. Thanks for attending.